Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check. Check. Check 1 2 2. Check 1 2 2 2.
All right, welcome back. We're just going to have a few minutes with our one of our silver sponsors, Pulse Security, who just wants to give you a little bit of awareness of who they are, what they do, and what they're thinking. Here's Dan.
Great. Thank you, Alex. I just want to thank the BSides team for the opportunity to be here today and tomorrow with you all. I just wanted to introduce Pulse Secure to you. Pulse Secure is a new company, but many of you may know our products. Pulse Secure was formed out of the acquisition of Juniper Networks SSL VPN and NAC solutions. We purchased those on October 2nd of 2014, and we're headquartered in San Jose. Matt and I are based here in Canada. So come on over. We've got our booth. We look forward to speaking with you further. On October 2nd, we also purchased a company called Mobile Spaces to help secure applications and data on the Android and iOS devices as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Look forward to enjoying the rest of the conference with you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Dan. All right, one announcement. We do have a lost phone. It is a Huawei Wind phone. So if anybody knows whose this is, it keeps on vibrating in my pocket. Please find me, and I'll return to the happy owner. All right, so for our next, it's actually a panel. Our premier partner, Vancouver Economic Commission, helps tech startups get into the market. And we thought, I know a lot of the geeks in the community that have really great ideas, but don't necessarily know how to articulate that into turning it into a product or into a business. So we thought it'd be a great idea to have some people from the industry discuss how to take your idea and turn it into a product. So I'll introduce Sean from the Vancouver Economic Commission.
Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Sean, and I'm from the City of Vancouver's Economic Development Agency. And we're working hard every day to promote Vancouver as a global destination for innovative, creative, and sustainable business. These are some of the areas that we support: the technology industry, the digital economy, and the green economy. If you're at all interested in learning more about what's going on here, would absolutely love to talk to you guys. We have a booth out afterwards. So why is the city's Economic Development Agency at a hacker conference? Well, we're actually here to tell you that something special is happening in Vancouver and something that you guys are a part of. Vancouver's startup community and the technology sector here is thriving. In fact, it's booming. We're starting to see this being recognized in the media. We're starting to see an explosion of entrepreneurship, and some of our smaller companies are growing into international superstars. And that is not done in isolation. That is done with people like you. The security technology industry is growing and thriving in Vancouver. You guys know some of these companies, but they're really starting to make waves. And it's when we see stuff like this that we know that we need to support what's happening at the grassroots level with the security technology industry here. So you see Avigilon buying the former TELUS building. I mean, that's an amazing acquisition of real estate. 2/3 of the real estate in Vancouver that's coming online, this new real estate that everybody's worried about filling, are being filled by technology companies. That's a really exciting fact, and nobody seems to be talking about it. Wanted to read you a quote from the CEO of Absolute Software. He said, "There was a technology presence in Vancouver when he was building his company, but he felt quite isolated." And then he goes on to say, "And now we're at the center of something very exciting." Fortinet, who's here today in the back, they're recruiting smart people like you. They've just been recognized as BC's #1 technology company by the BC Technology Industry Association, and then now as Employer of the Year. So there's fantastic opportunities to build your career in BC and in Canada. And the message on that front is that you don't need to leave this city to build your career. And I think a lot of you already know that, but this is really tangible now. So these are some of the companies in our space, some of the companies that are on our panel here today to talk to you about building a company here. So I'm going to show a brief video that we've put together that really highlights some of the exciting things that are happening here in our technology industry. And I hope you guys enjoy this and start to feed off some of the energy of what's happening here.
Want to change the world? Want to be a leader? Break something. We've been told don't break what isn't broken. If it's safe, it doesn't need fixing. But those who build, those with vision know that there's no distinction between creation and destruction. Everything that ends is the beginning of something new. Watch how the chrysalis of an idea tears at the seams. Give it a name. Let it live in another form. Sometimes rebirth can be violent. But no one says transformation was gentle. Break something. Crack open the surface of what could be. Rediscover curiosity. Vision is the catalyst for innovation. Passion is the fuel that builds momentum. Imagination is the blueprint for manifestation. So break something. Create within a cacophony of brilliant thinkers. This is where inspiration converges with capital, where we shatter the limits of what we thought could be. Pushing boundaries is the backbone of the city. Dare to be dynamic. Wear innovation like a second skin. Move fast in a community of movers and breakers in a mech of a global game changers. Your place is here. Your time is now. So break something.
Thanks a lot, guys. Want to introduce our panel here. It's going to be moderated by a good friend of ours, Jeff Fox of NRC IRAP. He's going to introduce all the folks, and I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Thanks, John. We thought it'd be a good idea to have a little bit more of a interactive session today. So if you have any questions, just put your hand up. I'll try and repeat your question, and you can direct it to one of our panelists. So I'm happy to be moderating today. I have with me a group of entrepreneurs that have built, or in the process of building, or are getting ready to lead their next startup in the area of security technologies, payments, financial technologies, also known as fintech. So a lot of good background here that have been brought together that should make for a pretty good session today. So to my left, I'll introduce Catherine Lowen. Catherine is the founder and CEO of Control, which is a management platform for the payments industry. Control allows merchants to manage and monitor their payments from iOS, Android, and the web. A little bit of background on Catherine. She started her career with Citigroup Europe, developing one of the first online banking systems, CitiDirect. She's worked in the world of online gaming and has been a director of product management in e-commerce and risk management applications. Welcome, Catherine. To Catherine's left is Nick Badminton. Nick is a futurist and authorist and is currently regional managing director of freelancer.com, the world's largest online freelance marketplace. Nick has over the past 18 years has worked with a lot of different companies, from Huffington Post, Tech Vibes, LinkedIn Pulse, where he curates events related to tech. He is also involved with CyberCamp YVR, Product YVR, and Dark Futures. Welcome, Nick. To Nick's left is Bernd Pitak. Bernd is a seasoned entrepreneur. He's been with LX Ventures / Mobio here in Vancouver in an executive management role as CFO. He's got a strong technical background and over 3 decades of professional experience. He's provided professional consulting advisory services in a whole variety of different industries, including fintech. He's done mergers and acquisitions analysis and opportunity analysis, and a whole variety of different advisory services in healthcare, games, and technologies. Welcome, Bernd. To Brent's left is Peter Luong. Peter is the CTO and founder of Fusion Pipe here in Vancouver. Fusion Pipe develops enterprise security, mobility solutions that solve authentication problems for medical, telecom, and utilities customers. Peter brings 12 years of experience in the area of authentication and technologies, network security, carrier network deployments. He's been involved with CIBC, Government Alberta, Nortel, IBM Canada, and he's currently, in his role as CTO for Fusion Pipe, involved in driving forward the intellectual property and patent portfolio that Fusion Pipe is delivering as part of their initiative. So thank you and welcome, Peter. To kick things off, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to say a little bit about what this panel is all about in your experience. What have you done, or what are some of the pitfalls of starting your technology company or past technology company? Share with the group, and as I mentioned before, if you have questions, put your hand up after we talk to each of the panelists, and we'll try and get a lively discussion going over the remaining hour. So in no specific order, I'll start off with Nick Babington. So no pressure, Nick.
That's okay. Yeah. Hi there. Just quickly, a show of hands in the room. Who's ever used like freelancer.com or another sort of online resource marketplace? Yeah. I've been chatting to quite a few people, and I think this kind of community to get stuff done quickly kind of uses it. We're currently about 7 years old. We went public about a year and a half ago. We're at 14.7 million users. And what's really interesting, when I was asked to speak on this, which was this morning, thinking about security and privacy and authentication is actually something at the very heart of what we do. And it's at the heart of what we do because we operate in 247 different countries around the world. And we connect people, you know, in places where they've got a very low-tech infrastructure, but they still need to use an online platform in the collaborative economy. We're actually seeing even things like mobile going up by 81% year-on-year traffic. Mary Meeker from Kleiner Perkins talks about the reimagination of everything, where we've got wearables, implantables, the Internet of Things, and everything coming to bear. But what's really exciting about the world digital economy and the digitally connected is there's only about 3.5 billion people actually on the internet. So there's a difference of about 4 billion people that are going to be coming online. And they're going to be coming online in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. And what they're going to do, and what are we going to do as companies as well? So we operate with a huge bandwidth of projects every day, lots of people authenticating, paying each other around the world from many disparate countries in every single configuration as you can imagine. We're managing fraud, we're doing everything. There's actually something really interesting that I just wanted to bring to the table with this, is that you can't just think about systems. You have to think about the humans that are actually using the system. So some of the talks that we've actually seen earlier have been really great when you talk about the human element. So actually thinking about, you know, the people, process, tech, governance, and information that exists in everything that we're doing is something that we take very, very seriously. And we measure and we optimize, and we're very transparent as an organization. So I think, I don't want to keep going on, but what we do is we connect people, we connect a new economy, we help entrepreneurs get going. So if you've got an idea, you can jump on our platforms. But the one thing to think about, if you're thinking about building any level of technology, think about the empathy that you need to build into it. Think about the empathy that you need to build into your operations as a company, and that you're actually making a difference to people's lives as well. And I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Nick. Peter, a little bit about what Fusion Pipe is doing and what you've seen over the past few years in growth and challenges.
Okay, great. Yeah, I definitely wanted to share my experience in terms of starting a company, especially in the enterprise security space. So coming onto this panel is it's a great event for us to be able to kind of share some of our pains and the great things of starting a company. So I personally moved to Vancouver after the Olympics. So I came here for personal reasons. But in terms of my career, I worked in large enterprises for most of my life, whether it's network security or working at large enterprises on security-related projects. I definitely saw a big opportunity in terms of when Apple released the iPad. And I thought, okay, there's some opportunity here to turn this into a business tool. So that's kind of how I started off the company here. But literally, I came here, I didn't know a big group of people, so I had to actually develop and build together a strong team to be able to execute on where we are as a company as today. So I've been very happy with what Vancouver has brought to us in terms of the ecosystem for tech entrepreneurs looking at starting a company. And it's with BCIC, NRC IRAP, Vancouver Economic Commission, BCTI. They've been great for entrepreneurs just to really to put that seed together and start a real company here.
Thanks, Peter. Catherine, in controls, been pretty active, and
yeah, we're pretty busy. I want to get a show of hands. Who here uses Stripe, or at the very least has heard of Stripe? Okay, so quite a few of you. So that's cool. So as Jeff mentioned, I worked in the world of online gaming, and Nick and I were just discussing this before the panel started. So at Freelancer, they use about 5 different payment methods. So they accept payments using WorldPay, a little bit of Stripe, PayPal. In online gaming, we were using at any point anywhere from 30 to 40 different payment methods because we had customers from all over the world. And it's a North American bias to presume that everybody around the world shops online using a Visa or MasterCard. So working in online gaming, one of the biggest challenges that I saw from being on the management side of having to work with my dev team to integrate all these different APIs and such was all of the overhead involved with trying to get relevant and real-time data from all these different payment methods. And also applying to get merchant accounts with all these different payment methods. So there was a whole process involved with what the banking industry calls KYC, or Know Your Customer. So having to go through these very lengthy application documents and processes, and then getting all these APIs and varying different languages and standards and such. So every new payment method we had to integrate created an administrative burden and a technical burden for us. So when Stripe came along with a standardized set of APIs, with APIs built on RESTful services, with a automated and streamlined application process that could do all those KYCs in the background without any friction to the merchant experience, I knew that Stripe was going to be big. I knew they were going to be revolutionary. They were going to revolutionize the payments industry. At the time, I was working for SAP, and I was actually, I'd gone from building and managing products for the e-commerce industry to, I finished my MBA and thought I'd do a career transition into selling e-commerce products. And we were building, selling e-commerce platforms, and I liken it to Magento with $1 million price tag. So enterprise systems for the likes of Burberry and Adidas, for large companies that needed an omni-commerce strategy. And we'd done a lot of work on optimizing the mobile experience for the consumer from the consumer side. So if you're Adidas and you wanted to be able to sell your sneakers online, or to somebody that was accessing your site from a Samsung or an iPhone, we provided a set of SDKs or responsive templates so that your site could resolve to whatever browser the consumer was coming from. But what was really interesting was our own customers, our own enterprise customers, were asking for our business applications, our business management applications, to be in a mobile format as well. So it was kind of a springboard for me. Number one, I wasn't very satisfied with working in the corporate environment. I'd always had an entrepreneurial spirit. The Stripe thing and monitoring what was going on there, and then seeing this idea to start building B2B apps was the catalyst for me to actually start my own company. So I actually initially launched an Android product for Stripe. There was nothing in the marketplace that existed. There was an iOS product for Stripe. It ended up taking off really, really quickly. It was enough motivation for me to actually quit my job at SAP with a good salary and benefits and go headfirst into the startup world. I actually ended up working with Invoke Labs. So if anybody's familiar with the Invoke legacy, so Ryan Holmes and a couple guys started Invoke Media. They had a number of clients out of New York that were looking for better ways to manage social media, and then you probably all know what happened there. They spawned Hootsuite out of that. So I joined Invoke Labs as one of their companies in residence. I became a Stripe partner along the way, and it's been a short journey. I only started the company in May of 2014. I ended up acquiring my iOS competitor. So I now am the preferred Stripe partner for iOS and Android management of Stripe accounts. Along the way, I found out that our customers are also, that problem of having to have different payment methods depending on where you're operating. Our customers were asking for PayPal, and then we started getting asked for Bitcoin. So since then, I've revamped the strategy. What we're trying to do is become the Hootsuite of payments. So we're building a platform-agnostic platform that can effectively manage a number of disparate sources of payments data. And it's not ironic that Ryan Holmes actually joined as an advisor and investor, because he solved the same problem with social media 7 or 8 years ago when Twitter and Facebook opened up their APIs that we're doing in payments. And it's a really exciting place to be, because Stripe pioneered the idea of open APIs in the financial services industry, and now everybody's following suit. So PayPal now has a set of open APIs, Coinbase, Duola, etc. So it's a really exciting space for us to be participating in right now.
Thanks, Catherine. Bernd, your background.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Maybe I'll take a slightly different approach than the rest of the panel, just so that you get a slightly different perspective. I'll start with 2 seconds about my background. I started as an engineer, and my sense is BSides attracts a pretty technical audience, so a lot of you are going to kind of understand what that means. I had an 8-year career coding, and decided to go to business school and join one of those very large, prominent consulting companies where you learn 25 times faster than you do in normal life, but they make you travel like crazy and so on, some of the discussions that we had before the panel. At the end of that, like a good consultant, I came up with a nice matrix, and I said, where do I want to settle down? Yes, I want to come back to Canada. How brutal a winter do I want? Well, not very brutal, being a Winnipegger. So, Vancouver bubbled quickly to the top of the places that I wanted to settle down afterwards. It's a place I'd visited many times. And I came back with that large consulting firm, and I started here. But I knew, maybe like Catherine, that at some point I was going to get out of the corporate world and I was going to do my own thing. And I suspect, looking around the room, that there's a more than double-digit percentage chance of people that either have done that or are going to consider doing that in the future. That was 2002, and let me tell you, there was, no one could spell VEC. There was no Sean taking care of us in the tech business. There were no meetups. There were no great conferences like BSides. There were no kind of hip-hoppy videos to hype you up on why Vancouver is such a great place to do this. I came back directly from the Bay Area. I was velocitized by the community that they had down there. And I decided to come back to Vancouver, being a good, loyal Canadian and wanting to be here in a place where people don't keep guns in their glove compartments. Remarkable kind of off-ramp to take to come from the Bay Area back to Vancouver. It's a good thing that my first startup at the beginning of 2003 was in the game business, because at least we had EA here, and there was one meetup that I could find, which of course it wasn't organized online. It was organized the old-fashioned way with a telephone. And we got together once a month and talked about the development of games, and it was a bunch of game geeks, which was just getting going in the city at the time. But there was none of the kind of resources that you would all have available right now if you wanted to start the kind of business that we're talking about here and that many of us have been involved with. But boy, what a change. I don't think there has ever been a better time or a better place than Vancouver to get in, to exercise your entrepreneurial gene and decide that you want to do something on your own and do something very interesting on your own. This conference is about security and authentication and fintech and things like that. And there is absolutely no industry I'm more excited about. There's no industry in its broad sense that I think is more staid, more conservative, more regulated, has more bits and pieces and spaces in it that still have not been disrupted, that are waiting for people like you and I to come along and say, there is a better way to do this. I just have trouble thinking back even to 2002 and say, how the heck did I do my first business with absolutely no one to call up and say, hey, I have a problem. How have you solved this problem before, and what options are available to me, and what assistance can I find in the community? All of that exists here now. I think you can use that as an entrepreneur inside the organization you're in now if you're working somewhere, or you can use that community as an entrepreneur if you want to do something on your own. and many people end up doing both at different times in their careers. But I am super excited, first of all, to be an entrepreneur and be very active in Vancouver. Second of all, I'm very, very interested in the particular industries that are of interest at this conference, where there's so much yet to be done, so many interesting things to do, and it's hard. It's hard to be secure, it's hard to do things well, it's hard to work for the user instead of for yourself. These are difficult things, and that's the hallmark where I think smart people can be very successful. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Brent. So the panel has some very good background, and it's certainly many of you may be in the throes of doing a startup in the area of security, authentication. Is there any questions? Anyone want to ask the panel and kick us off here before I dive in? I'll look for any hands up, and I'll try and repeat the question. All right, going, and Jeff gets to ask the first question. So what I wonder is I look at the payments industry, and payments has aspects of how different sites and different companies architect how they do payments. But what I've always wondered is how secure is the information being collected. And a number of the other presenters this morning raised the concern. Well, you should not be concerned with security. You should trust what's being done with your information, mainly because you have no choice. But if your information is misused, then you have the option of speaking up and saying something about it. So kick things off, Nick. What do you reflect on my words? How do you feel about how information is being protected in the area of payments and security and really what it comes down to online privacy and protection of that information?
So when you've got a two-sided marketplace, very much like what freelancer.com has, just a very quick précis, you can post a project, you can get someone to do your project for you. So we collect money from the side of the project poster and the side of the person doing the project as well. It's not just the collection of that, and we actually do institute like Know Your Customer, very much like banks as well, and a number of the other online economy companies like Airbnb have started doing it a lot more. And there's a lot of fuzzy logic and a lot of human logic in there, as well as some hard and fast sort of rules and regulations. We're actually a public company in Australia, and that helps with a lot of stringent regulations around our business as well, because we're basically building a country online, right? When you think of it from that perspective and thinking about security and building that into the systems, it's not just the technology solution as well. It's we've got about 400 people worldwide, and I'd say a large majority of the company that we've actually built is around support and dispute resolution, because in these new economies, people, well, they didn't do quite what I said, and we set up milestones in our system and the such like. But the dispute resolution and those processes are equally as important as the tech that comes into it as well, and also the transparency of I'm an employer, you're going to give me that. Yes, I absolutely know that you've delivered the work. Here's the money now. Or there's some really unscrupulous people, right? And I think that's the challenge in the modern economy is the people that still want to game the system. And we work very hard to stop that gaming from happening. So we're very much like running a national economy of 14.7 million people, right?
Peter, comments on this topic, or Nick's words?
Yeah, it's actually, sorry, just kind of building on that question again. But I think just kind of talking about like some interesting technology that's coming into the marketplace, something that for myself that's very interesting is really around wearables and how that affects privacy, security, and a variety of other things when you get into enterprise as well, looking at authentication. Apple is coming out with a new watch that's coming into marketplace, and how do you use that as a business tool? We definitely see the demand for, wearables in terms of fitness types of devices. But now you're taking like really personal data, and whether you're storing it in a cloud service, and what you're hearing Apple is doing in terms of working with some of these healthcare providers is Now you're taking some of this consumer information that's stored in, let's say, Health Kit on your iPhone, and how do you hand over that information to a healthcare professional, and now making, critical decisions about your personal health, and who actually owns that data. And that's pretty interesting for us, but also at the same time, it kind of ties into some of the things that we're doing in the enterprise, which really ties into wearables and where things are going. Running a couple interesting projects at UBC that ties into the Myo armband, and I'll get a chance to talk about that in a little bit.
Anyone else? Comments? Catherine?
Yeah, so we're pretty fortunate in that we're working with one of our partners that pioneered the use of OAuth in the fintech industry, and I think they're one of the first that did it. So Stripe's version of OAuth, they're actually using OAuth version 2, OAuth 2. So they've actually branded it as Stripe Connect, and it allows applications, third-party applications such as Control, to securely access data on our merchants' behalf. Before Stripe pioneered this in the financial services industry, you'll see some of our competitors are still using this antiquated method of authorizing access by doing a copy and paste of the API key. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with having to do it through that antiquated model. So much like, Hootsuite was able to build a better marketing management platform around Facebook and Twitter because Facebook and Twitter also employed OAuth around 2007. So the great thing for us is that through using OAuth, all of the merchant data is still managed by Stripe. So it really offsets a lot of the compliance and security burden from ourselves onto them. So we're able to securely access that data. And unlike a money service where a payments company that's actually managing the data, we don't have to actually absorb any of that compliance responsibility. There's a certain amount. We are still, we rely on Stripe to manage that handshake for us. We are still managing people's emails, a little bit of biographical information, but a lot of that compliance overhead and burden is actually offset to Stripe. And as I mentioned, we're seeing it become more standardized. So PayPal, for instance, recently just launched OAuth. So our application is going to be able to access our merchants' data using this newish secure protocol.
Thanks, Catherine. A question, a comment on the current topic, or another question. Speak loudly if it doesn't. I think the acoustics are pretty good in this room, but if no one can hear you, I'll repeat the question.
Thank you. My question, just to follow up on that, Catherine, it sounds like you may have answered, is I'm curious on the anti-money laundering and KYC side. When you're offsetting the responsibility for compliance, is that feeding every transaction from Stripe and PayPal and these providers through FinCEN and FinTrack, or is it only under the conditions that KYC and AML is required, like at certain trigger points, such as $10,000 or $5,000 transactions?
Yeah, so again, all of that sort of burden is managed by Stripe. So Stripe and PayPal, they have got, I can't even imagine the weight of the compliance burden that they have to be responsible for. So they're going to be managed and regulated by FinTrack and securities law, and by the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and PCI compliance, and a whole number of different things that have come into play around security and privacy related to the payments industry. So the cool thing about us working with Stripe is that our customers, it's a prerequisite to even use our product that you have to be a Stripe customer. So Stripe's handling that vetting process on our behalf. You can't actually do anything useful with our app unless you have a Stripe account. So that's kind of the first step, is actually connecting your Stripe account. So all of that KYC burden, all of the the anti-money laundering acts and regulations happens on the Stripe end. We actually never have to see any aspect of that. As a Stripe partner, though, however, there is some onus of responsibility on us to report suspicious activity. So, one of the benefits of Stripe is that it's very easy to get a merchant account, but it's also one of their disadvantages. They actually have quite a number of fraudulent companies that sign up for a Stripe account. Maybe they've created a dummy site saying that they're selling flowers or what have you, but they're actually involved with a number of illicit black market activities. When we see a company that, they say that they're selling custom dog leashes, but they're doing $150,000 a day in volume, it is our responsibility to say to Stripe, hey, I think these guys aren't actually who they say they are. They might be up to some illegal activity. But again, it's not our legal responsibility. There's no regulatory body that's actually enforcing that on us.
I just want to add to that because we're the opposite of that. we kind of have to. We've got certain rules, and as soon as you hit certain levels, yeah, you will get a phone call from our team in the Philippines or from down in Sydney or wherever in our offices. But typically from the Philippines, they'll call you. They'll verify that you've just submitted that money. You will go through the KYC kind of regulations. We have to do it all on our own backs because we are this sort of economic force in the world. We've got the regulations. We can't just say, hey, PayPal, you can deal with that. That doesn't work for us, right? Hey, WorldPay, you can deal with that. That doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for them either, right? So you've got a lovely situation.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's really, really hard to be able to manage that. And some advice if you're going into this space is define your process and don't think that once your process is defined that's the end of your process being really secure, because the nefarious characters in the world will be on you every day trying to break the system and act in ways that the system shouldn't be used. So we're very active from that perspective, and you'll probably see exactly the same behavior with people like Airbnb and the such like as well, because it's changing the way that economics works online as well.
Other comments? Bernd?
Yeah, I think it's worth remembering that there are two fundamental approaches that you can take for security and concepts that you can have. One of those is, I think, what we're largely talking about here. And the other one, Catherine, I think you were hinting at. And I just want to make sure that we get back to that one in a second. Approach number one is collect the information and then protect it very, very carefully. Protect it from people who shouldn't read it. Protect it from loss or incorrectness and so on and so forth. That can be a huge, huge burden. And I think the message you're hearing from all of us is be really careful about taking that on. Do it if you have to. But there is another approach, and the best way to summarize this is talk about my experience at Mobio. I was asked by some investors to step in as CFO. You guys know that CFO has another name. It's called Mr. No. It's the guy who has to say no to an expenditure. It's the person who has to ask the hard questions around the management table. And what we found ourselves, the situation we found ourselves security-wise at Mobio is that we were beholden to the new COPPA regulations in the United States. The COPPA regulations are intended to protect consumers 13 and under, and they have taken the exact opposite approach. It's not know your customer, it's don't know your customer. And that's very interesting because it is a mechanism and a thought process that's available to a lot of startups, whether they know it or not. If you choose not to collect the information, you are not responsible for protecting it. You may not need everything that you could possibly collect. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable thought process for you to go through to say, should we even be collecting this? Do we want to be known as, Zuckerberg light, collect absolutely everything we can, and then have the thing either blow up on us or incur the enormous expenses that some of these organizations have to incur? There's a very, very reasonable other path, and that is to say, what do we really need for us to do what we want to do with our service, the value that we want to create, and let's not collect anything extra. And when it comes to financial information and so on and so forth, this is a very, very important thing. I think, Catherine, that's what you've largely done by going OAuth, is you've outsourced that process to someone else. It gets more challenging if you're serving young consumers in the United States and you fall under COPPA, because you are not allowed to collect that information, period. So you have to create your value and monetize that value without knowing who that individual is, and in fact, without anyone being able to subpoena information from you and reverse engineering it and finding out who those consumers are. So just think, as technical people in this space, how difficult that actually is. These days, when the device is collecting information and the carrier is collecting information and everybody's collecting information, and you literally, as the organization, have to say, no, we will make sure that none of that ends up in our database anywhere. In the case of COPPA, you're legally not allowed to do that, and you have to prove, potentially with a code review, that you're not collecting any of that information. So I think there's a broader implication to that, Catherine. I think you're kind of going down that road by saying, let's only do what we actually have to do. But I think it's worth all of us thinking about is, do we really want to take on that burden of controlling that information, or is there another way?
I almost just feel that we should get to the point where we actually give people a choice to actually own and use their own data, even if you submit it to a system as well. Jaron Lanier, a very famous guy in the VR world and a futurist around the information economy, talks about we've become slaves of an information economy. So we give all the data away and we sign away our rights. But he also talks about an alternate reality where potentially in the future we can actually have organizations that do hold the data, but they hold it for you. It's your responsibility, and you can monetize it, and maybe they take a cut like under different rules and regulations as well. So I love that point, but I also think that there's a progression that every company needs to start thinking of around, why can't I have a Facebook account and Facebook pay me for the use of my data, right?
Other questions on this topic or new topic? So in my background as an engineering manager, the gentleman down here introduced it, well, it's a common term in the banking industry and financial industry, know your customer. I worked for HSBC as an engineering manager for many years before my current gig with NRC IRAP, and I talk to a lot of companies, and I usually ask them what are the trade-offs that need to be made in efficiency and how your system authenticates your customers. Peter and Fusion Pipe's company, they're going with Bluetooth low emission, where it's proximity-based authentication, which is very leading edge, especially relevant in the medical and military environments. What's the panel's feeling on how many hoops must be jumped through to authenticate a customer or an unknown person to an organization before you allow them in and start collecting data? Bernd.
Well, I guess there's two questions there. Is who are you jumping through the hoops for? Okay, Catherine, to use your service as an example, I mean, you're providing a certain level of value to the customer. There's certain information that you need to provide that value. But then stacked on top of that is a regulatory regime that also wants information for their own purposes, good, bad, or indifferent. And the question is, who really do you want to be the information gatherer for? And understand that in certain businesses, when you step into that line of business, you're taking on a burden that doesn't add anything to the value of your product, but you may just, by virtue of being there, have to collect information on behalf of the NSA or CSIS or FinTrack or whoever it is you're doing it for. So I think there's an additional question: is who are you collecting it for? I would be in favor of ideally collecting only the information you need to provide the service, your current and your future kind of imagined service, and leave it at that. And just be very, very careful. Sometimes by adding one extra feature to your product, you can expose yourself to the collection of information and the adherence to regulation that you had no idea. And it could be just one little feature.
Thanks, Bernd. So your view is gradual collection of information over time, depending on the longevity of the relationship between a company and their prospect or customer.
Sure. Every piece of information you collect is a responsibility that you bear and an opportunity that you have. And the question is, does the value of the opportunity for yourself and the consumer outweigh the cost of that? My own personal experience with a number of fintech startups that I advise and have been involved with is be very, very careful with that. I don't think you want to be spuriously collecting additional information, especially personal information and financial information. My general advice, which doesn't apply in all cases, is collect what you need, collect what you have to, collect nothing else.
Catherine, agree or different perspective?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I've got two perspectives on this. So in online gaming, so we were handling a large volume of deposits on a daily basis. So We were, handling bets right before the Super Bowl, and we could see deposits of $10, $15 million per day happening. And our policy was to remove as much friction as possible. We wanted to, if you put a $3 or $4 million ad before the Super Bowl, you want to be able to get signups as quickly as possible and with as little information requisite as possible. However, where we did then apply more of the KYC rules was when it came to then the funds being deposited out or transferred out. In online gaming, you are exposed to all sorts of different types of fraud risk because it's all digital. There's large volumes of money that are being transferred about. So, for instance, we would consistently get hit by fraud rings that would set up a scheme that kind of looks like this. So we'd have, we were using all sorts of different fraud detection tools such as IP sniffers and the ability to create a matrix of related computers using the machine IDs. But there's fraudsters so sophisticated, they would go into an area they knew had never been sniffed out by any of the negative databases that were sharing information about fraudulent areas or behaviors. They would go into a warehouse in the outskirts of Berlin. They'd set up 30 or 40 computers. They'd be using a list of stolen credit card numbers that they'd gotten off the black market, and they'd be going in and they'd be depositing, fairly reasonable amounts of money, say $300, $400, $500, using stolen credit cards. And then they would go into a poker room, online poker, and start deliberately losing to other players within that room. The players they were losing to, however, had developed a profile at the site. They actually had a bit of reputation. They'd made some successful deposits. They'd made some successful withdrawals. They were being withdrawing funds to an account that had been verified. We'd actually done the KYC scrubs on it. And over a course of 3 or 4 hours, they were able to effectively launder $50, $60, $70, $100,000 plus using this fairly well-concocted scheme. By the time that the original cardholders knew that their credit cards had been compromised and they had a series of fraudulent charges racked up against them, that fraud ring would actually had decommissioned the whole operation, packed it up, and headed off to the new location to do the exact same thing. So we started to actually having to get, develop different algorithms and rules around how to even predict this behavior before it started. But our policy remained the same. Remove as much friction as possible on the actual deposit process when the money comes in, get those accounts, get people to sign up easily. But when the funds start moving the other way, that's when we started really locking things down.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, we've reached the end of our time, so I'd like to thank Peter, Bernd, Nick, and Catherine for their time. If you have questions for them, they'll be around for next period of time. Just don't be shy. Come up and grab onto them and ask them your question. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.